There's a lot of talk about how frequently should you optimize your ad account, whether you should turn off the ads on the ad level, how much to increase your budget, and how often. Today, all of your questions will be answered as I'll share my optimization workflow and explain the whole decision-making process. So first things first, to actually make any decision, I need to be familiar with the data. For every client, I have a primary KPI. For some clients, it's a ROAS in the ad account. For other, it's MER or NC ROAS in Orbim or AAA. Whatever it is, I make that number my North Star metric and I try to hit it no matter what. So before I even start optimizing the ad account, I check yesterday's revenue, MER, and ROAS. If the client is in Australia, then I check today's numbers as well, because due to the time difference, there is already data populated by the time I wake up. Then I check my daily reporting sheet to understand the trends. Considering main metrics, CPM, CPC, click-through rate, AOV, and conversion rate that are color-coded based on the performance, I can easily understand if the performance is improving or not and what's the main reason. For example, here we see that CPM went up, but that was not a problem because click-through rate followed and MER followed as well. So basically this was last Black Friday. Then on some other cases, we can see, okay, CPM is going down, that's affecting our click-through rate, but our conversion rate is not really following, so potentially ROAS does not look great. You want to balance between those four metrics, and that's the easiest way to troubleshoot. So basically this sheet allows me to identify weekly and monthly trends so that I can adjust my decision making accordingly. After I check this sheet and I input the data, I jump into the ad account and third-party tracking software, if the client is using any. Some people consider third-party tracking software as a noise, but I think they're really helpful in a few ways. They let me identify NC ROAS or new customer ROAS, which is always the main KPI for my clients. Then I use that metric when optimizing as often, even with the full buyer's exclusion, both from Pixel and Sync from Klaviyo, your ads would get served to existing customers. In other words, they allow me to see the difference between ROAS and NC ROAS and make decisions based on the target that I want, based on NC ROAS. Because otherwise, I could potentially increasing budget on something that's not necessarily attracting new customers. Another useful thing from third-party tracking software is percentage of new visits. It tells me to what extent is a certain ad doing retargeting. Even if you add buyers, website visitors, and Facebook and Instagram engagers as an exclusions, but you have an image with a discount offer, that ad would 100% be served to retargeting audience. It's hard to explain that to clients sometimes, but showing them percentage of new visits as well as the often high frequency, it's a proof that this creative is actually doing the targeting. And in this case, the static with the offer is definitely doing retargeting. It's important to mention that I'm never day trading with the ad account and the data and the budget. I'm not adjusting things multiple times a day. It would become overwhelming both for me and both for the ad account, and nothing good can come out of it. I do only serve scaling during the Black Friday period when I know the performance would be great and the expected conversion rate is there. So then I can allow myself to squeeze a bit more. In terms of the what period I'm looking when I'm optimizing the ad account, sometimes it can depend on the AOV. For example, if the AOV is over 300 plus, I would looking at the last 7 days performance. Otherwise, my sweet spot is today plus last 4 or 5 days. I found that to be a sweet spot between the historical data and the recent performance. So if you want to understand how your CPA or ROAS is moving through that period, you can use this recent feature that Facebook added. It's a chart. Basically, you find one ad set, you click here, view chart. It takes you here where you can actually pick what metrics do you want to check, and you can see how they're changing through time. So for example, this is my spend. This was an ad set that was spending like 3K a day. You can see I started decreasing its performance. You can see here when I actually decreased the budget. Why I started doing that? Because initially we had amazing CPA, but CPA started rising, so I had to decrease the budget. So you can actually change this. I usually use amount spent and cost per result or ROAS, depending what your main KPI is, and then you can actually check how your performance is changing through the time based on how are you making decisions. So we touch base Facebook performance, but it's important to mention that even if my Facebook performance is good, but my MER, which is let's say my main KPI is bad, I would not increase the budget, because my goal is to follow main KPI, because that's the ultimately when the brand or my client is making money. So it doesn't make sense for me to increase the budget because potentially that would not make sense for the business. And the other way around, if the performance is bad and the MER is good, I'm not going to necessarily decrease the budget. Now that we mentioned budgets, I need to cover how often and in what increments I'm adjusting the budget. To be honest, that depends on how aggressively I want to scale and what's the current budget of the ad set. For example, if your budget is just $10, $20, it just doesn't make sense for you to increase your budget 20% every 2-3 days. You will never actually get to the scale. I usually start my budget with $100, so after 2 or 3 days of a good performance, I can easily increase it to $150. After 2 days, I can increase it again to $225 or $250. As you can see, I don't have a set rule or percentage for a budget increase. Obviously, you cannot just bump $500 budget to $1K. I mean, you can, but it's not really gonna work. It's gonna probably mess up the algorithm. But you can easily bump it from 50 to 100. I know many of you will ask now, like, but what about the learning phase? It would reset. But to be honest, I don't really care about resetting the learning phase. I care only about the performance. And learning phase is not necessarily often connected with a good performance. Your performance would not magically improve 50% after you exit the learning phase. Also, I'm definitely not a fan of duplicating ad set to scale it. That's so 2018 tactic. I'm also not a big fan of surf scaling. I value stability more than the fair scaling. But as I mentioned, I can surf scale during big sale periods when I know performance would be great. If I'm making decision based on Facebook data, then I can easily incorporate rules. But if I'm making decision based on triple whale, Norbeam, or click ROAS, then I have to do it manually, because I cannot set a rule to be fired based on third-party tracking data or based on just click ROAS, unless I'm only on 7-day click. So for the most of the clients, we notice that the performance is way better during the weekends than the weekdays. So I'm a fan of 2 approaches to maximizing efficiency during those periods. Number 1 is scaling in advance. Basically, at Friday evening or Saturday morning, I would bump the budgets on best performing ad sets, knowing my performance would be great during the weekend. Increase the budget on best performing ad sets between 20 and 50%, and on Monday morning, I decrease the budgets no matter how good the performance was on the weekend. Another option, which I'm a bigger fan, is Advantage Shopping Plus with a cost cap. So basically, I have high inflated budget in my Advantage Shopping Plus campaign with winning ads, and I have a cost cap at my target, which I'm comfortable Facebook spending. That allows me to set a higher budget because there's a low chance Facebook would perform bad, just because I have proven winning ads there, and it's a weekend when generally conversion rate is higher. So before the weekend, I would potentially increase the bid, allowing Facebook to spend more during the weekend, because my expected conversion rate would be great as well. This is a safer option, and it allows me to scale on a weekend massively, often 100% more in budget than during the weekday, with the same CPA. So we covered the budget, so let's not talk about the ads on the ad level. Cost Cap Gang believes you should never turn off the ad, but I audit multiple ad accounts fully on Cost Cap where the performance of some ads is terrible. I'm talking about 0.3 or 0.6, no matter if you check the last 7 days, 30 days of a lifetime, and those ads are still active, and some of them spend like over 2K. It's just mind-blowing that these guys would not turn off the ad no matter how bad the performance is. I'm turning off ads that are below the target, but there's a caveat to this. I agree that the spend is always an indicator of the performance of the ad, and that Facebook determines which ad can handle the scale. But if performance is tragical, there's really no reason to keep that ad active. Obviously, this also depends on the overall performance. If my results are generally good and I'm scaling, and I have an ad that's like 10-20% below my target or average ROAS, I would keep it active. If my results are down and I need to cut the budget overall, I will be more aggressive with turning off the ads and increasing the budget. So here are a few things that often help me to restore the performance when it's down. So number 1, I call it a handbrake. Basically, you're just pulling back the budget a bit to the level where it can again hit the target ROAS. And number 2, resurrection. This is something I found is working when you have an ad that spends substantial amount of money and it had a great ROAS for a while, and you managed to scale that ad set, but then the recent performance started dropping. So it makes no sense for me to keep that ad running with a high budget, but it also doesn't make sense for me to turn off the ad and the ad set that you managed to scale. So I turn off that ad, I duplicate it, I make sure that I use the post ID to give it a fresh start. In probably 70 to 80% of the cases, that ad just picks up where the previous one was before its performance dropped. Why does that happen? Well, it's already a proven combination of the audience and the ad. It just happened that like Facebook had a bad period. So it doesn't make sense for me to turn off the ad set that I managed to get to 1K just because the performance is not good in the past couple of days. So that's it, guys. This is how I'm optimizing the ad account. Obviously, there are nuances to this process, but these are the most important things that you need to know. If you're an ecom brand spending at least 50K a month on Facebook ads and you want me to implement this process in your ad account so we can scale effectively, apply for a free audit below.